What are some historical lies that people generally believe? Salieri and Mozart actually got along quite well. If they did have a rivalry, it was merely professional. Salieri didn't promise his chastity to God, or if he did, he didn't follow through because he got married and had kids. Salieri didn't have to manipulate the emperor to earn favor with him. He was a well-respected composer, and one of the richest men in the country at the time. Amadeus is a great film, but it's a good thing that it doesn't start with based on a true story. At least it's honest. I'm looking at you, Braveheart. That Marie Antoinette proclaimed, "Let them eat cake." In reality, it seems to have emerged from a short anecdote in an autobiography published by French edit Jean Van Born, philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and is frequently misattributed to her. Not just this, but there was a massive propaganda effort to make her disreputable in France. She was a young girl when she was shipped there to be married and was close with her maids. The fact that she was Austrian alone had the populace against her. There were many flyers and posters made of her having sex with her maids which were distributed freely. The French really were not big fans. Louis XVI also had no mistress, which usually would be blamed for any unpopular decision by Louis. You couldn't blame the king OFC, so you needed a scapegoat. That left Marie Antoinette as the prime target for criticism and propaganda. Combine it with the most important families of the realm being pissed at the royal dynasty, an upcoming state bankruptcy, and a few other factors, and you get history. That Cleopatra was some sort of otherworldly beauty who mesmerized every man she met. Ancient historians were more impressed/scandalized by her intelligence and ability to manipulate as easily as she breathed, and it wasn't until centuries later that she began to develop this reputation as a sexy seductress. Cleopatra's ancestors were big fans of incest. The 16 roles of her great-great-grandparents were filled by just 6 individuals, and members of the Ptolemaic dynasty had a reputation for being odd-looking. Cleopatra, reportedly, was above-average looking compared to others in her family, but according to historians like Plutarch, the general consensus was that her beauty was in itself not altogether incomparable, nor such as to strike those who saw her. NASA spent millions on developing a pen for space. The Russians used a pencil, suggesting NASA isn't very intelligent. They were perfectly correct to make a pen for space. A pencil would have released loads of tiny graphite particles during use, which would float around and interfere with electronics. That the Roman Empire fell in 476 AD, and then it was the Dark Ages. In reality, a peasant living through 476 probably wouldn't have realized they were living through the end of one age and the start of another. The beginnings of feudalism had already started back during Diocletian's reign. Barbarians' warbands and barbarian Roman troops had been a fact of life for generations. The barbarian king who deposed Augustulus still considered himself a rightful representative of the empire, etc. In some ways, the fall of Rome was sudden and traumatic. The population of Rome itself absolutely cratered in the 400s, after all, but it was really more of a gradual, centuries-long transition than a fall. Einstein got straight A's in school. They probably only say it to make kids feel better about themselves. That Viking helmets had horns on them. Like WTF, who the hell would think it was a good idea to place 2 objects that are easy to grab on your protective gear? It's like asking to get necked or stabbed. By the way, here is a real Viking helmet. People today live twice as long, on average, as people half a century ago. It was 33 in the Middle Ages and over 65 today. While technically true, it's not because people live twice as long. It's because less infants die. Without all the zeros factored in, the average has risen, even though people live roughly the same amount of time. Factor out infant mortality, and the increase is relatively minor, more like 60 versus 65. Hitler didn't become a monster because he was kicked out of art school. He was a neckbeard bouncing around Vienna filling his head with all sorts of bullshit philosophy, and well on his way to becoming a monster when someone suggested that he look into an art and architecture program at some school. He made a half-assed application which was denied, and he continued to sell little paintings to get by while he read all his crazy books. He trumped up the kicked out of art school story in Mein Kampf.